And for more insight now on this matter, we are joined by Professor Hartmut Winkler, who joins us via our video link. He is from the University of Johannesburg, from the physics department. Professor, I'm sure you were keeping tabs on what took place today during that Scopa meeting in Parliament. What do you make of, the discussions that took place? And many had been wanting to know the answers for quite some time, more so after Ruyter conducted that interview earlier.
Yes, well, it's very clear to me that Andre de Ruyter is now regretting that he ever did this interview, because even though I think almost everybody in the country will agree that there's some degree of corruption, in fact, very bad corruption, at Eskom, if you come up with specific allegations that some particular individuals are involved or even steering this whole thing, you've got to have a fairly certain evidence to go ahead. It now turns out that, and it was reported on another news outlet this morning, that the investigation which Andre de Ruyter relied on was very dubious. And this is a news site which would normally have published this kind of story immediately, because it's clearly it's a hot topic. It's something which almost any news organization would love to run with, but they had their serious doubts about it. They just simply said quite a few things don't add up. And if you do come forward with allegations like that, you've got to have stronger evidence than Andre de Ruyter seemed to have with him. And I think that explains a lot of the sidestepping, where he didn't want to name names, he didn't want to do anything else. So ultimately today, we don't really know anything more at all. And I think somebody commented that across the political spectrum, everybody's very disappointed with what happened today. And I think that's indeed the case. It's a bit of a damn squib in a sense, but it's not making Andre de Ruyter look any better. And neither is it good news for people who really want to investigate what is happening corruption-wise at Eskom, because this mistake, in a sense, is just going to make it much more difficult to coherently look into what the problems are bedeviling Eskom.
You are expressing that many people were left quite rather disappointed. Are we surprised at all from what we got from the former CEO from Eskom today, especially considering that, he went on a tangent and told us about the deep-rooted corruption at Eskom, but today he was not forthcoming?
Yes, exactly. He was sort of hiding behind the legal arguments, and I can understand why. If he had actually spelt out who he had been told, and in some of the media outlets, and indeed said that there were actually names of very prominent people who were supposedly involved in this assassination attempt. Now, if you come forward and say something like that, you better be sure that this information is correct. And it just looks like in this case it isn't. So if he had actually come forward and actually said what names he had been told were behind this, he would have faced serious challenges. We already have a situation where the ANC has threatened to, or indicated that they would like to take him to court for various insinuations, and that would just simply have helped the ANC's case. So he's basically backtracking right now, and it's a pity because, as I mentioned, it's very clear that some very serious losses due to corruptions are occurring at Eskom. I think all we know about now is really the tip of the iceberg. So it would have been really nice if there would have been some very concrete kind of suggestions which would have led us to closer to who the main culprits are behind this. But I'm afraid Andre de Ruyter doesn't seem to have this information. We hoped he would. So right now he's really speculating, as all of us are, who might be benefiting from the crisis at Eskom.
Professor, what does it say about accountability, especially for an SOE like Eskom, where South Africans are even facing problems of stage 6 load shedding? What does it say about somebody who was at the top of this power utility when it comes to accountability?
Yes, I think that what Andre de Ruyter tried to do, he probably genuinely believed that this was the way to go. And in a sense that if you don't trust the people around you if you just think that corruption is so widespread that you actually can't tell anyone what's happening. Then in a way it makes sense to bring in some completely unconnected outside firm to do an investigation. But in this case, it's clearly backfired. And yes, I think it's another sign that when Andre de Ruyter came in, he believed he could turn around Eskom. He wasn't able to do so. It doesn't really surprise anyone. Also, Eskom is now talking of shortlisting and interviewing candidates for the new CEO. Again, I don't know who they've got, but I'd be very surprised if any of those people can single-handedly turn out this organization. Eskom's just got massive problems, and it's not a case of getting the right coach here. I like making comparisons with Bafana Bafana. Bafana Bafana are not going to become world champion regardless of which coach you end up getting. So at the same time, Eskom, the best you can hope for is a CEO which manages to steer the ship through troubled waters without sinking the ship entirely. And Andre de Ruyter clearly thought that he could actually do much more than that, and he was wrong about that. And ultimately, that's why he failed in his mission.
And Professor, we also heard, they're from Scopa saying that they are expecting Pravin Gordhan, the Minister of Public Enterprises, as well as Dr. Mufamadi to appear before it next week. And we have heard from the former Eskom CEO that he did divulge that very crucial information to Gordhan. Can we expect to actually hear it from the minister himself next week? Or do you think it will be a repeat of what we saw today?
Yes, I suspect it will be a repeat of what we saw today, because I cannot imagine Minister Gordhan or Sidney Mufamadi actually in front of everybody saying that this is the name of the person who is suspect number one. So I don't know what those two individuals thought when they heard of this. I'm sure they would have thought that, well, okay, if this is the allegation, that would be very big, and they're certainly not going to take it any further unless they have more evidence. That could also explain why Minister Gordhan supposedly didn't react to the situation the way some people would have expected him immediately. For Minister Gordhan to go to a colleague or a senior member of his party and say that you are accused of being this and this and this, it's very difficult to see this situation occurring inside a political party. So that, to me, I suspect they're also going to play it slowly. I'm not sure to what extent they would be compelled to actually answer who the name was that Andre de Ruyter gave to them. Although, technically speaking, if one reads some of the newspapers today, one can actually see who the names were of those individuals. I'm so reluctant to repeat those names online simply because I don't want to be pulled into this myself, but people can read it. And in a sense, these were people who were maybe considered publicly by various people to possibly be involved in this, but there's clearly no evidence of this.
All right. Thank you very much. That is Professor Hartmut Winkler there from the University of Johannesburg, the physics department, just giving us his insight in terms of what his thoughts are on that testimony which we saw from the former Eskom CEO. Also, they're saying that he's not expecting much coming next week when the Public Enterprises Minister is expected to also stand before Scopa.